Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome to the Ikonns podcast. I am so happy and grateful to be back on here.
We're back.
Alex is here as well.
And on video. This is incredible.
The new progress with this podcast is that we're going to attempt to record every session of this podcast. So it can be on YouTube for those of you who prefer using that platform. And of course, it can be on the podcast, the Spotify, all the apps. What apps do you use to listen to podcasts?
I listen to Spotify. Hopefully we can do Spotify video as well. Who knows?
A Spotify video?
Yeah.
What is that?
And when you're on Spotify, you can watch video as well.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was possible. So yeah, I'm really grateful to be back. I'm really excited to be back. Alex, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling, actually I didn't want to do this. I'm like, hey, my voice is kind of low. Let's not do it. You're like, no.
I cannot hear any difference in your voice whatsoever.
I think I sound more manly today. It's a more of a
Why are you
deeper.
feeling okay?
No, I'm feeling perfect. Yeah.
So
no.
what's up with the voice?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I've been talking a lot. You know, I like to talk. So that's the thing.
Alex is definitely one of these people who will schedule 20 meetings in one day and then still meet somebody for lunch, and then he'll drag me to it. And I often actually say I want to just focus on, sitting down and doing some work on my own. And the reason I bring this up, I've always thought I was an extrovert, but when I compare myself to you, I'm definitely not such an extrovert.
You are. I still believe Mimi is more extroverted than me. You have to get into that rhythm. Once you've been out of the extroverted kind of socializing a lot.
I'm still socializing a lot.
Yeah.
I host people all the time at home. I still meet people but I'm not the type of person who can meet probably, like have 7 back-to-back meetings like you do.
Oh, well, at the same time, Mimi is the one, because we used to do these meetups back in the day. We might restart to do that as well, do an event, which we're looking forward to for sure fairly soon. And come on. I remember still in New York, we did it in Central Park. There was probably 300 people there. It was probably, 3-4 hours of back-to-back.
It felt like a minute.
I think it was 3 to 4 hours of back-to-back, just people meeting Mimi. And I was kind of the person before people would meet Mimi. And I was exhausted after those 3 to 4 hours. But
I was high on the energy.
Mimi was like, let's do it again. Like, let's do more. I was like, whoa.
Let's do this every day.
So that's what I'm trying to say, that as you build it up, and I think you do love actually big audiences and volumes.
I love it.
You love it all. So anyways, but we're super excited to be back and filming the Ikonns, recording the Ikonns podcast again. We're back. We're also going to be actually starting another podcast, Intelligent Change podcast. So we're in full swing. It's really exciting.
And we're back on YouTube. Obviously, I'm posting this video on YouTube as well. I'm back on YouTube making videos every week now. What about you? What happened to your YouTube channel?
So my YouTube channel got totally deleted. I'm still trying to understand what happened. However, some of the people who watch us and listen to us started DMing me and said, hey, I can't find your videos anymore. And I'm like, oh, wow, people still watch my videos. Great. And then I kind of just ignored it, to be honest. People DM me, and I haven't posted on YouTube for a long time. I've been off it for a while. And then I just checked it out. I'm like, oh wow, it's true. I saw because before on my
couldn't even find it,
on my LinkedIn, I had a video posted kind of that would link to YouTube, and it was down. I'm like, that sucks. And but me being not very reactive, I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm sure I can get it back. And I tried to get it back, and I couldn't. And then I reached out to people on Instagram, said, hey, can somebody help me? My YouTube channel is down. People who are fairly high up on Google and YouTube actually reached out to me, and they tried their best. So thank you all who helped me. But literally they said, sorry, we can't, there's something happened that we can't retrieve this channel. My theory is, and this is a very important, I had the YouTube channel set up on a Google Workspace account, it's like G Suite they used to call it.
Yeah, I remember.
And back in the day, they used to have a free account. So you used to get one free user. And I signed up on that. And I think what happened was they stopped that program, but I was still freeloading that domain. and they're just probably just cleansing all dormant accounts that weren't active.
Is it not attached to an email that you use often?
Because it was my like personal email. It was under my domain. So it was alexikon.com. So it was hello@alexikon.com.
Which you don't really use.
Which I don't really use. So anybody who emails me, I'm
so
sorry.
They can probably tell, yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, it just completely,
Ouch.
I'm out. And I had over, 150,000 subscribers, millions of views, and totally deleted. However, overall, what I'm trying to say is like, I'm fine. And I'm going to restart again. I'm going to start from scratch.
I'm more sad for the content that was out there.
Hopefully there's a backup somewhere. So that's kind of
We'll find out.
Yeah, so that's
we haven't gotten to that yet.
But I think the other thing I want to chat with you about, I think a lot of people are like, hey, why'd you guys disappear for such a long time? So Mimi, can you tell us more why we disappeared?
You're putting me on the spot. Well, first of all, the way we started this podcast is that the original idea was to, of course, have some episodes where you and I chat like we are today, but also a big focus on the podcast was uncovering inspiring stories of other people that we know or that we get to meet in our day-to-day life. And we had the pleasure of interviewing so many inspiring entrepreneurs and yoga teachers and all people from all kinds of careers and walks of life. And we did that all in person. So for us, it was really important, and I think still is important, to have the person in the chair on the sofa next to you where you can look in their eye and have a real conversation and record that conversation without slow internet. And obviously I'm over exaggerating. There's so many people out there doing podcasts virtually, but I think, and you can let me know how you feel about this, for us it's still important to have that human element and to do it in person. Of course, maybe sometimes there will be exceptions and we're going to do it virtually, but I think we'd like to keep it in person for the most part. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think we just have to figure out the tech side of the podcasting, things like that. However, it's true. All this that we do more for fun. I think we're one of the rare influencers, you might say, who don't really monetize too much. Even when we had,
and we never monetized the podcast. That's true.
Yeah, we did almost 100 episodes,
and we always fed our host. It was like a whole process. The guests would arrive, they would get fed, we would have dinner together,
drink wine,
and then we would even have sometimes tea, dessert, and then have the podcast. And it was just very long process. I don't feel like it's sustainable. I feel like now we're going to do it different. We're going to do it probably during the day, not in the evening, but we'll still attempt to do it in person.
Exactly. No more dinners for our podcast guests. You're like, why?
It's a big commitment to do that every single time you record with someone.
Exactly. But overall...
What about you? Why else do you think we stopped? In the best time, actually...
At the peak.
The peak of podcasting, and when people actually started listening to more of them was obviously 2020, when people were obviously captive in their homes and weren't able to leave, and they kind of turned into that medium. And
we seem to have...
It was definitely a great opportunity from one side, but for us...
I think looking back now, and it seems like we have this trajectory, we leave at the peak of things. So even YouTube, you stopped YouTube a while ago, and now we're like, hey, YouTube is still like happening, so we're coming back. And same with podcasting. The biggest reason is really that, as you said, it's the being in person and having those conversations in person, which is so important. Of course, we could have still had the conversations we're having now in person. Me and you were still together the whole time. However, I felt at the same time, it was a time for us to just sit back and observe the world and not be too reactive to a certain extent. And I think sometimes it's important in life to not have to overdo stuff. And I think that's the beauty of how we do things, is that we don't have to do things. We get to do things.
We choose to.
We choose to do things. And that's, I think, the exciting thing about how we approach business or life, And we are in this fortunate
content creation. Yeah.
and we are in this fortunate position where we're able to choose that, hey, I want to do this and I want to show up. I'm not doing this because a sponsor is paying me, or
It's a good time to do it because I know I'm going to get the views or the subscribers.
Yeah,
I completely agree with you.
and it relates, I think, to the topic that we want to discuss today of authenticity, you know, being authentic with yourself to how you want to show up in the world, and do you want to even show up in the world. So I think it's very important. So I'm curious to speak to you about authenticity, because I think it's so important, a conversation topic for so many people, because I think the reason why we, let's say, watch others is that, especially we are gravitated towards other people who are authentic with themselves. And it can be not just in the way of YouTube or through podcasting or just creators, just in life in general. I think we love when we can feel, we have this bullshit detector to a certain degree when the person's being authentic. And I think that's very important. So I'm curious to hear from you. Why is authenticity so important to you, and why did you want to talk about it today?
I think in this time and age, authenticity is becoming increasingly scarce. And as it is becoming increasingly scarce, I think there's more opportunity for those who are authentic to really capitalize on their authenticity, because I feel like there's less and less people who have the courage to be who they are. At the same time, I feel like there is a movement of people, I do pray, of becoming aware that at the end of the day, your authenticity is your superpower. And it's not something that is being taught in schools. You know, it's actually the opposite. In traditional school, you are told to fit in. And authenticity is all about standing out. And today what I want to discuss with you, and what I think you and I have not been scared to do on our journey of being Alex and Mimi, humans in this world, is not having, I guess, having the fear of standing out. I'm not gonna lie, I've had the fear of standing out so many times. I still have this fear so many times, and the resistance to do something because I know I'll stand out, I'll say something that will be different, and this is not the popular opinion or belief. But at the end of the day, as I look back on my journey, I know that it's only because I stood out that I'm here today. If you look at anybody famous or successful, these are the people who stood out in history. Why did they stand out? Because they used their voice, they used something differently, they said something differently. And of course, you're not gonna stand out just for the sake of standing out. But if you have something different to say, use your voice. And again, it is a difficult quality to have because it's not something that's being taught. In school, we have to fit in. You stand out, you ask something different from your teacher. If you're lucky and you have a great teacher, the teacher will encourage that. The teacher who is wise will want the student to challenge the norm or what the teacher is teaching in the classroom. But oftentimes, if you don't agree with what's being taught in school and you challenge your teacher, what's gonna happen?
You're gonna get punished.
The teacher is gonna tell you to shut up and listen to the presentation, whatever the teacher is presenting, and know your place. You're a student, I'm the teacher, you listen to me. Of course, for all the teachers out there listening to this right now who are great and who are modern, because this is the old school way of teaching, of course. I'm not saying all teachers are like this. The great, wise teachers, we're all teachers at the end of the day too, right? So it's about giving that freedom for others to stand out. It is not something that is encouraged traditionally. That's all I'm saying, right? So having the expectation of people to easily be able to be authentic is not something, for example, I expect. But I think for people like you and I who didn't fit in the traditional system easily, we always stood out. For example, I remember on my journey, even back when I lived in Baku, Azerbaijan, I stood out because of what I wanted for myself. A typical girl back in the day, again, I'm not saying in modern Azerbaijan, Baku, this is the case now. Back in the olden days when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, when I still lived there, a girl would want to finish high school, go to university, and then get married, have kids. That was the path. For me and my sister, this is not something we wanted. We were very clear about it to everybody, all of our friends, and everybody who knew us knew that this is not the path we wanted to take. So naturally, we stood out. We always said that we're gonna, as soon as we have the chance, we're going to leave. We're gonna travel the world. We're gonna meet different people. We want to see different cultures. And people just looked at us like we were crazy. So from the moment I can remember myself and being aware of myself, I knew I was different, and I knew that even if I tried, I always stood out. I didn't have the opinion that the majority in the room had. And I guess I've learned to accept that, even though at times it is very difficult, and I kind of wished I fit in. And then when I moved to Canada, I stood out because I was an immigrant, because I sound different, because I didn't grow up with these kids, because I dress differently. And it is funny because I think about this to this day, and I battle with it at times. And I'm being, again, completely honest here, because I know so many of you listening to this, I don't know, I'm getting emotional right now, can probably relate, because, you know, as an immigrant, you move from place to place. Like now we live in England, and I stand out because now I sound like American. So, you know what I mean? Like when I lived there, finally, I sounded more like Canadian, and people meet you and they're like, okay, you're from Toronto, you sound like me. And now I am different again. And some of you have actually mentioned that I sound more English now. Sure, maybe I started pronouncing some words differently, of course, because we've lived here for 9 years. But to English, I sound American. Not even they don't care about me. Oh, like, are you from America? I get, well, actually not all the time and not as often as I used to. But what I'm trying to say is that I've always stood out for various reasons. And yes, that sometimes can stop me from speaking up. But I've challenged myself throughout life to not be afraid, even to do this podcast. Who am I to sit down and talk about all these topics? Well, I choose myself. And that is all it takes sometimes, is to choose yourself, to speak your truth. And oftentimes you will find that you will have many people relating to your truth, but they're only attracted to you and want to watch you because what you're communicating is something that is special, is something that most people do not have the courage to speak up about. How do you practice authenticity in your life? How did you find a way to find the courage to also be quite straight up? Because I know you are very authentic in all your communications day to day, which sometimes can mean losing a friend, but you're always 100% honest.
I think it's an ongoing journey. The most important thing to understand is not like you, even myself now, I wouldn't say like, hey, I'm authentic 100% all the time and I'm not afraid, I don't have the fear of kind of truly being myself. From the time we are born, as you said, we are taught to fit in. And evolutionary in our DNA, when we are already born, there's already that gene that says like, hey, don't stand out, like just be part of the tribe. Because what has happened in the past, historically, right? Even with our genes kind and this is thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, if you would stand out, like something might happen. And if you get if you're not going to be part of the tribe, it's a lot harder to survive. And it's the same thing even today. There's different types of tribes now, right? It can be in a workplace, it can be in a school. So it can be very difficult for people to stand out and go on their own. On my own journey earlier on, as you said, there is something great about being an immigrant. And that is because you come in this new country, you're totally different.
By default.
You don't even speak the language, so you're outsider right away. And then you try to fit in. Maybe you find your crowd, you find your clique. Maybe they're immigrants as well, and whatever. However, as I grew up, I've learned that to listen to that intuition to myself and like, does this feel right to me? because a lot of times they'll say, grow up in Canada, be like, hey, watch hockey, drink beer, and do stuff like that. And yeah, I did it. But then after a while, I'm like, I'm not finding this fun. I don't think this is fun. So why am I doing this? Why am I keep doing this just to fit in? So I then started to be, step out and be more on my own. And then to find, what is that community? What does that attract for myself? And it took a long time. I'll say meeting, the reason why we're together is because we connected on those similarities. We kind of found our own little tribe of, hey, in terms of self-development, of growth, of being more global, of traveling the world. Like, come on, we met in a suburb of Toronto, like Richmond Hill. It's not like we've always been super city people. And that is really the journey of authenticity, is coming across these situations and sometimes being off path and not being authentic, and maybe dressing like you shouldn't really want to dress, and you're dressing because the people around you dress where you think it's cool or whatever. You're following certain trends.
It's part of self-exploration.
So I think it's, as you said, it's important to explore and see and see what feels right. But at the end of the day, the most important thing to follow through on, we all know deep inside. It's just, as children.
Yeah, how do we know? Because I feel like many people watching or listening now, they will say, well, it's all easy for you because well, I don't know what my authentic voice is, because I'm so used to believing what I've been told by my parents, by my school, by my church, by my whatever environment they've had. So how do you peel the layers of conditioning and get to the core of your own authenticity? How do you do that?
I think there's different practices that can help. It all stems from the idea of, like, how do you raise that awareness of self and be with your own thoughts and not with the thoughts of the external world that we're always inputting. Even, let's say, people listening right now or watching, you're inputting our thoughts, our realities onto you.
It's very true.
However, you do have to filter out as you have this, as you're consuming this type of content, to see what feels right. I was actually listening today, and I had a great conversation with Cameron Rosen. I'm sure we'll have him on the podcast as well. A really young, incredible gentleman. And he has a podcast where he was just actually reading from a book.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
There you go, you got it. And in that example, he was just reading through the book where, I left the windows open and the wind blew in and got all this cold air inside the house.
I listened to the podcast this morning.
Oh,
too.
you did?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
It was great.
And it was just.
So was that him recording the podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't put the two together.
Yeah, but in that example, what he was trying to say is like, okay, then I just closed the windows and I, let the fire burn, because I guess it's olden times, to kind of warm up the house again. And in that analogy, I was like, wow, this is so thought-provoking. This is what we do. We just let our windows open
all the time.
And we just let this whatever information come in without having that filter of, actually, no, this is my house. And
what do I actually think?
Yeah, yourself. Like, how do you create that structure for yourself, and how do you clear that out? As you've talked in the past, you've done, let's say, Vipassana, which is like a 10-day silent meditation retreat, which is really 11 days or even 12. I still haven't done that myself. I think that can be a very deep exercise to help you clear out, because, as you know, you can speak about it more. The first few days, you're literally just cleansing the thoughts. So I'm wondering if you can chime in on that in terms of that exercise of your experience, maybe in Vipassana quickly, and just how many thoughts there are that may be not even yours.
I mean, in my case, obviously everybody is different, but in my personal situation, there's a lot of thoughts every second. Sometimes there's like dozens of them in a second, and they're bombarding me. And what I've noticed when I obviously went to these retreats, and I did it 2 times, well, actually I did it 3 times, but first time I left on day 3 or 4, and then I came back and I did the full 10-day course, and then I went back the following year and I did it again. But the second time I was serving and sitting the course, and I noticed that when I went back and I was serving and sitting the course, it meant that I could talk when I was in the kitchen, kind of prepping the food and helping to cook and manage the kitchen so that we can feed all the people who were sitting this course, and usually it's about 70, 80 people. And we were able to talk in the kitchen, all the servers, maybe there was 7 or 8 of us. And when I would go back to sit and meditate, it was so much harder to meditate because all the things we said and all the things, all the judgments that were passed, all of that was in my head. Whereas when I did the 10-day course without talking to anybody, which is when you first go into it, it's the only way to do it. They don't allow for any other structure. It's like you have to go for 10/11 days. You're able to talk on day 10 evening, or actually afternoon, but you still have to stay till day 11. That's when you leave the course. I noticed that it was so much easier to do it when I was just sitting the course without talking to anybody, because by day 7, 8, and 9, it was so much quieter. But obviously the first 4 or 5 days are extremely difficult because, again, you're kind of shining light onto these realities that are not real, if that makes sense. And in a way, like I said, you are an onion and you're peeling the layers of what is not you. And as you're shining the light, you see what is you and what is not you. And then slowly you get to the core. And it's almost like there's this inner knowing and this inner intuition that is there, that it is very hard to even verbalize what it is. It's an experience that you have to feel. And many of you, I'm sure right now, may be having goosebumps because it's the truth. And you know, a good friend of ours, Joanne, she calls them truth bumps, because when when you hear the truth, you know it's the truth, because we are all one. We're all connected. The universal wisdom is in all of us. That's why you don't need to read anything. You don't need to. If you want to, sure, go ahead and read it. Go ahead and watch it. Go ahead and talk to someone. But at the end of the day, you have everything already inside of you. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need to change anything. It's all in you. But how many of us make the time to sit and let the fog clear, basically? If another analogy I can present is, if you take a cup and you put, a bunch of sand and rocks and things and you mix it, it's going to be very blurry and very dirty. You can't see. But if you put the cup down and you let it settle, everything will settle down and you will clearly see through the water, right? So this is what meditation does. If we're constantly being bombarded, just like more sand is added, more rocks, more stuff that is not us, more dirt, more information that is not even relevant. If we don't make the time to sit down and clear, we don't know the truth. We're operating from that ego and the conditioning that is brought to us, the opinions that are not really ours. But if we regularly make the time for sitting still and just sitting with ourselves, more and more we have the clear path to our authenticity, our heart, our intuition, you can call it whatever, our inner God. Then you have that connection with your authentic self, and then you can communicate that authentic self. But let's remember that we're all human and we are imperfect. So we are going to change. So one day you can be vegan and that can be your authentic truth. And there's nothing wrong with you in a year to change your mind and say, you know what, I have tried that and it didn't work for me. And in our day and age, people are so scared to speak their truth because they're afraid to be canceled. And I remember we grew up in times that were quite different. People had debates. You could say something and we could debate about it. For example, if you're my friend and you like Coke and I don't like Coke and I don't believe Coke is good for you, I'm not going to cancel you out just because you drink Coke and I don't. But I will tell you honestly what I think. I'll say, that thing you're drinking is not good for you. And maybe you'll tell me, you know what, but I enjoy it, so let me have my Coke. And we'll laugh about it, right? But nowadays, it's almost like if I like Coke and you don't like Coke, you're going to cancel me out. And I don't feel like that's fair to people, because then people are afraid to even discover who they are. That's my opinion. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you have to add to this topic.
Yeah,
Discussion.
thank you so much. I think that was very beautiful and well said in regards to all this. And I definitely recommend, myself included, to someday experience Vipassana.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Because I feel like the way Vipassana has laid out the rules, I feel like is a bit unfair to most of humanity. Because I think that it's a bit unrealistic to expect that everybody in the world will be able to go away for 10, 11 days.
It's a big commitment.
Not only that it's a huge commitment and it's a luxury that most people cannot afford because they have to work, but also it's really scary. In my case, you remember, I literally thought I was going to die. I believed that I was not going to come out alive from that experience. But it wasn't me who was scared, right? It was the ego. And yes, there was definitely a part of ego that died during that experience, but I'm still here, right? So I survived. And I think it puts a lot of people off to go on such a big commitment away for 11 days somewhere in the woods, because it's usually somewhere in nature, which is great, you know, because you can go for nice walks. It's the only thing that's allowed, because you can't talk, you can't, write, you can't read. So then I think it makes it a bit exclusive and not inclusive, right? And I think it's important that people are able to do this in any case. And I think they need to be better at advertising the fact that you can actually just learn the Anapana, which is just the basic breathing. And what I can do is I will link it down below under this video, or if you're listening to the podcast, there will be show notes somewhere.
Who's going to do the show notes? Oh man, we got to hire people.
Yes, we're going to need to get our stuff together. But yeah, there is a technique that is basically you sitting with your breath and observing the breath. And as the mind wanders off, which it will every single second sometimes, in my case it does, some people are able to hold that presence for more than a few seconds. You bring the mind back to the breath, and you do that over and over again for a period of meditation. If it's 1 minute or 10 minutes or half an hour, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to finish now, but I just wanted to mention one more thing. We were having a conversation the other day, me and a couple other moms, and one actually returned from Vipassana, and she was saying how difficult it was, but she did it, she completed it. And then the other one said, yeah, I'm going to try to meditate every day for half an hour. And I told her, just do 1 minute. You're not going to be able to do half an hour, I can tell you right now. To create a new habit that's you committing to half an hour a day that is actually really difficult, well, it's almost impossible. The success rate, I will say, will be very low. But if you commit to 1 minute a day, what do you think? What will be the success rate if all of us today commit to 1 minute a day of meditation?
I love it.
Right? But if you sit down for a minute, I told her name is Camilla, I said, if you sit down for a minute, I guarantee you're going to want to do 2. And then the next day you might do 3 or 4 or 5. And then you will build yourself up to half an hour one day or not. But it doesn't matter, because you'll still benefit from that minute or 5 or 10. So start today. You don't need to wait for anything.
I love it. And I think another resource I can recommend, which I really enjoy, and I want to actually do more regularly, is Tara Brach. And she's available for free, I think, anywhere. Same Spotify, Apple, or wherever. Guided meditation. And what I really like about her meditations...
She's a Vipassana teacher.
Yeah, and it's more guided. So I like more guided approach. That's 5-minute journal too. More guided approach. And what she does in most of her meditations that I listen is she makes you kind of also observe your body and also kind of imagine a smile, smile on your lips, but in different parts of your body. Smile in your throat, in your eyes, in your eyebrows. And she kind of like walks you through that.
I love that.
And you instantly want to bring that kind of also positive emotion into your life, which I think is really important. And once again, it's with that awareness. Many of us are not even aware that we're frowning, maybe all the time, So it's very important, because one of the things that we discussed yesterday in the Intelligent Change meeting, weekly meeting, was does your outer beauty directly related to your mindfulness practice.
Can you explain that?
So can I ask you that question? Because you weren't part of it, but
Okay.
do you believe that the outer beauty is related to mindfulness of the person?
Absolutely.
In what way can you?
Similarly to what you said, I think when I look at people out on the streets, strangers I don't even know, I can see where they're at. I can see their emotions just by looking at their expressions as they're walking. And sometimes they're walking on their own in the park, but they have this angry face or they have this frown line, you know. So I know what they're going through just by looking at them. And some people just have this peaceful expression, and
Which is rare, unfortunately.
yeah, and a beautiful smile or just a peaceful look on their face. And you just feel that energy radiating. And does that answer the question?
Yeah,
I feel like yes.
And
the
that's
answer is
and
yes.
Lilia from our team said yes, directly related, and I believe so as well. I really believe a lot of us think outer beauty is this thing that once again the society tells us beauty is.
Yeah.
Clothes you wear, your makeup, all that stuff, your hair.
Well,
However-
nowadays all the surgeries people do to look
yeah.
perfect, right? They do a nose job and the Botox and the lips are inflated.
Yeah, so and that's what a lot of people are doing, that to create that outer beauty. However, especially the mindfulness practices that we do is probably the biggest factor to your beauty and how you look.
I love that.
So it was a very great conversation that we had, but I want to bring this up as well because once again, once we listen to society, we then start focusing on the things that actually don't positively help us. All this it's free. Like what we're speaking about, it's like, hey, 1 minute, focus on your breath. It's like, it's not going to cost you anything. A practice that even let's say I have that I do on most days, is go out and be with nature. Once again, yes, it also can be a luxury these days to be in nature. However, many of us who even may have nature within us, even in cities, and maybe see a tree, observe that tree. Even today, in my workout this morning, I usually do, my practice is 5-minute journal, 7-minute workout. That's my routine. Very simple. But once again, as you said before, it's better to do something than nothing.
Absolutely.
Most people think of like this perfection, and I'm gonna be this 1 hour
all or nothing approach.
Yeah,
right?
I'm like, hey, if I do 7 minutes, I'm happy.
If
like,
that's all you can commit to right now.
Yeah,
that's okay.
And usually it ends up being a more for 15 minutes for me, and also it turns out to be more of a mindfulness practice because usually I'm barefoot, I'm in the garden.
It perks you up.
It perks me up. You feel that's another thing is I think a word that I'm recently learning is embodiment. A lot of us are not even feeling our body. We're not even aware of our body. And so even let's say going out barefoot in nature, what it does, and there's tons of scientific studies and things like that about grounding and connection. I think in simple terms, it just connects you to nature, to the source. It makes you, once again, with that reaction of your foot, be more observant of the sensations in your body, in your foot. And the same thing why it's good to, for sometimes, let's say, feel the cold of something. And to not to reject that feeling, but to feel that feeling. And so with myself, to say this morning, the mindfulness practice can be even just observing. There was a beautiful flower, and I just looked at that flower, and I observed it. That's mindfulness. So I think what I'm trying to add to what you're saying is that it doesn't always have to be these long retreats or these paid courses or whatever it may be. It's just simple practices. And these simple practices that we start to practice in our lives will help us be more in touch with our authentic selves. And I think another thing that I want to bring out, because sometimes listening to these kind of things, even us talking, especially if you're not doing it, you're like, it's not for me, or I don't do this stuff. I'm not perfect like that. Hey, we're not perfect either. When we're speaking, it's not like we're Zen all the time and we're always doing this stuff. No, a lot of times we fall out. Even me, a lot of people ask me, hey, do you do the 5-minute journal every day? I'm like, hey, I don't. I still practice the thoughts of the exercise. However, I don't always write it down. And however, the whole point of these practices is to get you in that rhythm, those routines, to then help you embody.
I was thinking exactly that word.
These kind of practices, and then kind of that state of the mindfulness that will help you then transform yourself. And as we chatted recently too, you can be, you know, older and you can be so beautiful. Simply because of just your energy.
That sparkle
versus
in the eyes.
versus a person that's older, but you can see life took a toll on them, and they, you know,
Bitterness,
the bitterness and how life is unfair and all that stuff. Or you can see an older person who's not super rich or anything, they're just normal, but they're just have that energy because you can see the appreciation for the moment, for life. And it's through those, you know, life and challenges and ups and downs that you realize how special each moment is. And I think in a way, it all relates to that authenticity, really following your truth and intuition and what feels right. And then, as the example I said before, be the filter. Who is coming into your home, whether it's the wind or certain information that you're listening to or the people that you follow on Instagram. It's still very important to create that filter, because the things that we input, you're now filling, as you said with that cup, you're filling up yourself, your subconscious, with this type of information. I know you're very mindful in regards to news,
mindful,
or watching movies or drama, any of this kind of sort, especially with our daughter Alexa. And I do believe that it's very important, because you then see the anxiety, it really comes in these people. If you're absorbing all this stuff, and I think we all have experienced in the last 2 years, because there was a lot of it, it's easy to just be in that state, and then you want to medicate yourself or do whatever. Yeah, of course, it's kind of this whole vicious cycle loop. And the way I think to get out of it is with these kind of simple practices to just be more with yourself in that embodied state.
So I guess to summarize, authenticity is about making time and space to be with yourself.
Yeah.
And many of us either never had these practices, so we don't even know how to do that. Therefore, we don't feel comfortable. So it's about learning to be comfortable, to be in your own company without having the television on or your phone on, watching and scrolling through Instagram, or having YouTube videos playing in the background, or listening to podcasts. Again, nothing is wrong with doing any of these things, as long as you also make time to just be in a quiet place with your own thoughts and your own presence, and that awareness.
And another thing I think to add, which I think is really important, something that we spoke about in our journey and I communicated to you, is that you're also not your thoughts. A lot of people will start believing into these thoughts of, like, you know,
I think that's such an important
the ones that will bring you down.
Up.
And then you start to identify with those thoughts. And if you bring that awareness that, hey, these thoughts are not serving me, you start to detach from those thoughts, that I am not these thoughts. So because same thing, it's like this video I shared with you as well, hopefully we'll link it on fear. But, you know, fear is always with you, and it's always kind of telling you
that was great.
these certain things. And it's important in that observation awareness to also detach from just those thoughts. They may be bringing you down, because your thoughts and your mindset is really what creates your reality. I'm a true believer of that.
And that's why we have to be, going back to your point, extremely careful about what we consume, because we become what we consume. The famous saying is, you are what you eat. Absolutely. Physically, it's proven that we are what we eat. But also, we are what we consume, not just physically, the food that we eat, but the information that we consume. So becoming more, again, selective, and sometimes consuming less. Less is more, but good quality content.
Exactly. Well, I think it was great for our return podcast. to be back.
Thank you, guys. I wanted to say I'm really grateful that you guys are here. I appreciate every single one of you listening.
And watching.
And watching now. Yay. Let us know if you like this visual that now goes along with the podcast. Leave us a comment down below and let us know what has resonated in this podcast. I'm really curious to hear.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So if you're on YouTube, drop in the comments. Also, if you're listening to this on the podcast, please make sure to rate and subscribe.
That always
Share
helps.
with a friend. It really helps. As we said, you know, we don't have any sponsors or anything like that. So it would be really great to just have you out there sharing this valuable content with other people who may help. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.